Okay, so we need to talk. There's a really strange phenomenon happening nowadays. Fans of Souls-like games have been seeing character action games as sort of outdated or almost past their prime nowadays. And on the completely opposite side of the spectrum, character action fans have been seeing Souls-likes as pretty much dominating the market, and just the general sense of oversaturation for that genre has more or less clouded the wider action game genre. It's been weird seeing the discontent from both sides sort of amounting more and more as time goes on. But for how peculiar this entire situation is, most of it still breaks my heart as a fan of both of these genres. I obviously have problems with a lot of these takes that people say, but the most sensible of these people on either side of the extreme spectrum still make plenty of good points. When I initially set out to make this video, I made it with a pretty good amount of anger in my heart. And make no mistake, I'm still going to be making counterpoints in this video. But the more that I've been thinking about the topic at hand, the more I'm willing to say, no, I do get it. This entire video is definitely going to feel like a uphill battle that I have to fight, just because I'm basically trying to pick a fight with two entirely different genres and fans of those genres. But I also believe that both of these types of games deserve some merit in the wider video game space. I don't think either of them deserve to simply stop existing, as so many people say. No genre, regardless of how old it is, ever deserves to just stop existing. Because as time goes on, evolutions come out for that genre. That's what people mean whenever they say pushing the envelope for that genre. They're adapting it, they're building it up. They're changing things up to make it feel more fresh, but if those changes are good enough, then they might become mainstays for that genre. That's kind of how video games evolve, and it's this evolution that makes things fresh. I also just want to make it clear that I don't have any ill will between anybody who is a fan of these genres in their most extremes. People like what they like at the end of the day. And on its own, I think that should mean that both of these genres have merit. I want to go at this video as a neutral in this discussion, if only because I'm a fan of both of these genres. And if you, as a person who feels very strongly for one genre or the other, decide to watch this video and you feel the need to say something, the only thing I ask you to do is watch till the very end, so that you can consider all of the points. Even if I don't change your mind on anything, I don't really want to. I just want you to consider that the side you're opposing has its own very good counterpoints. And I do think those should be taken in consideration. Know thy enemy and all that if you want to be pedantic about it. And if or when you get to the end of this video and you still feel the same way how you do right now, then you're completely allowed to disagree and make your point. Everybody is entitled to their own opinions, of course. But just know that if you're going to be rude about it, that doesn't mean I have to reply to you or give you the time of day. Debate is acceptable. Honestly preferred if you have a counterpoint that is strong and that you feel passionate about. All I ask is that you just be respectful, because if you aren't, then nobody's gonna care and you're just stressing yourself out for the sake of it. Do yourself a favor and just conserve the cortisol levels. There are worse things to be stressed out about and be angry about. Okay, and with all that out of the way, let's go ahead and start off by talking about character action games. What they are, and why I think they still deserve a place in video game culture. So, for the uninitiated, character actions go by many names. Action-adventure, character action, hack and slash. Nope, still don't like that one, sorry. If you want some examples, then God of War, Devil May Cry, Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance, Bayonetta, games like those. Character actions are games that pride themselves on player expression and the overall skill ceiling of the game itself. Chaining ridiculously long combos, multiple varied and fun options in combat, and a distinct gameplay loop that feels really simple on the surface. Easy to pick up, hard to master is sort of the name of the game here. The general runtime of any of these games is typically anywhere from 15 hours to 20 hours. Their campaigns are not very long most of the time, but in its place, the game itself asks you to basically play better and get better so that you can better embody the character. Oftentimes you're playing as a character who's incredibly overly capable. How your playable character is often portrayed is mostly just extremely capable. They're always confident in any situation that they walk in, not without some level of caution, and their confidence almost never comes at the behest of their intelligence, I guess, in a combat scenario. They're capable, but not to their detriment. They're confident, but not to their detriment. And you, as a player, typically has to embody that feeling. It's almost always a power trip. And this is our first big distinction between character actions and Soulslikes. It's almost the exact opposite. Most of the times when you're running around in a Souls-like game, you're almost always way in over your head. The game almost always feels like an uphill battle, fights that you have to earn through memorization and mechanical mastery. But interestingly, mechanical mastery is a reward that both of these games share. But in the case of Soulslikes, there's almost always a power gap between you and whatever you're fighting. And I think this is where a lot of the perceived difficulty for Soulslikes comes from. Souls-like games are not a power trip. At least not most of the time. But even still, it's the perception of this difficulty that helps cement the idea of what a Souls game is. It's a part of the genre's identity. And this leads to a common argument that is said by detractors of the character action genre, basically calling every character action game a button masher. Which is true. Sorry, I forgot to put the world's biggest asterisk on screen first. It's technically true. If you're playing on the lowest difficulty, a difficulty that is meant for people who don't play games very often or for people who are just not familiar with character action games. A difficulty that leads to the unintended playing experience for just about any game, actually. It's my opinion that easy modes in any game should be something of a accessibility option, and the harder difficulties are something you have to work towards. For those in the know, it's why I don't like calling these games hack and slashes. That naming sort of automatically assumes one to believe that just button mashing is the primary method to get through the game. If you're mindlessly pressing a button for even a couple seconds at a time in one of these games in their intended difficulty, you're very likely to die extremely quickly. Some of you might be saying, well then just dodge and continue to hit the same button. And look, that's not really the point. A well-made character action game doesn't have such thing as a dominant strategy. There might be one against a certain type of enemy or a boss, but the reason you have so many options in combat is to basically kill two birds with one stone. Your launcher move, the move that smacks an enemy up in the air and leaves them for air combos, can also be partially used as a dodge option as well as juggling and make that enemy a non-threat. But the skill focus for character action games doesn't just end at the mechanical moveset. Many of these games have a resource management angle. The proper introduction to this genre started with the Resident Evil series. Or rather, it splintered off of Resident Evil, and became its own thing. And that genre is referred to as the survival horror genre, which is steeped in resource management. And actually, to shift gears some, I don't think it's crazy to say that there's resource management happening in Soulslikes either. Just think about the importance of something like an Estus flask. You have to necessitate rationing out your Estus before you can get to another bonfire, or whatever other similar mechanic falls into that specific game you're talking about in the Souls-like genre. And that's kind of the thing, too. I feel like both of these types of games are a lot more closely entwined than people give them credit for. I'm not going to make the outlandish claim that they are identical games, that would be stupid. But let's just consider how vague of a term the action genre is. When you think of an action game, what's the first thing that comes to your mind? If you ask anybody, they're going to come up with 100 different answers, including, I don't know. To me, it's just that all-encompassing. So yeah, honestly, I think that both character actions and Soulslikes are sort of splinters from the wider action genre. With a topic and term so vague, why wouldn't it have splinters? And when it comes to character actions and Soulslikes, I don't think one is an evolution of the other. I think both of them are mutations of each other. They do things so differently compared to one another that they're not pushing the envelope, more so they're just kind of being their own thing. And actually, while we're talking about it, can we shift gears entirely for a sec and just talk about what a Souls game even is? I want to use this next section to sort of talk about games that are hotly debated to be or not to be Souls-likes. And while discussing each individual game, we're going to frame that around what a Souls game is. So jumping straight into it, let's start off with a really easy first example. If you've been going off the promotional material for Another Crab's Treasure, you'll decide pretty quickly that this is pretty definitively a Souls-like. The person working the YouTube channel definitely makes that clear enough with all of the shorts that they make.
In Another Crab's Treasure, our underwater Souls-like game,
So when we were making our indie Souls-like game, Another Crab's Treasure,
while developing our underwater Souls-like game, Another Crab's Treasure,
So
yeah, pretty open and shut case, I think. Definitely a Souls-like. But, seems kinda weird to call it a Souls-like still, isn't it? Like, yeah, you have the checkpoints that act like bonfires, and there's a little bit of build crafting, I guess, with individual stats you can level up. You lose the level up currency whenever you die, and you have to go retrieve it at where you died. All pretty Souls-like stuff. But keep all of this in the back of your mind, the game too. Because I want to jump over to something almost entirely different, but markedly similar when you think about it. Let's think about Sekiro for a minute. Sekiro, or however you want to pronounce it. Do me a favor real quick and throw away all of your preconceived notions with that game. Think about the game and don't think about Dark Souls, or the fact that it came from Software. And think about what kind of game is it? Because if it's a Souls-like, it doesn't play like any other Souls game in the market, even. Sekiro plays so differently that it kind of comes off as a sub-genre. So maybe games that are like it are Sekiro-likes, but I don't know, I feel like we're losing the plot a little bit here if we make another sub-genre. Just think about it for a minute. If a new Souls game comes out, and you're wondering what it plays like, you might be comparing a Souls game to a Sekiro game, or however you want to say that as. Does it play more like Souls, or does it play more like Sekiro? And no, don't worry, I do understand. Framing Sekiro like this and asking you to throw away all preconceived notions of the game does make me sound like a psychopath, I do get that. But if no other time, just humor me right now in this one instance. Because if Sekiro counts as a Souls game, it's a really, really weird Souls game, right? Linear upgrades found throughout the world, linear progression of your character through a skill tree mechanic, and very little, if any, build crafting to be found whatsoever in Sekiro. Now double back to Another Crab's Treasure. Its gameplay is definitely a lot more innately Souls-like, right? With the exception of one option you can find in the Accessibilities tab. And I know it's an accessibility feature, and it's not really intended to be played this way unless you just want to mess around with those options, or if you need to for whatever reason. But just as a side, if you ask me, I think Another Crab's Treasure accessibility features are by far the best accessibility features you can find in any game that I've played so far. Your option to one-shot a boss being literally a gun is hilarious every time, and it even feels good, like if you're just over whatever you're fighting and want to get rid of it immediately, one-shot bullet, it's dead. Like, that's hilarious. But no, what I want to focus on is specifically the extra parry timing option. With the use of one button change, this game goes from a Souls-like to something that plays a lot more like Sekiro. One button. That's all you need to do to change this game's entire subgenre. And that's all it changes. The primary focus of this indie Souls-like crab game is for you to simply have fun with playing it, which is why the accessibility features are there in the first place. Once I figured out you can parry in the game, it became my main method of combat all throughout the playthrough. And then finding the accessibility option that made it to where parrying was a central mechanic, well, I don't know, I just feel like it made the game a lot more fun for me. It turned the game into an underwater Sekiro clone, and that in general was just a lot more enjoyable for me. Like honestly, if you feel like jumping back into Another Crab's Treasure and you want an excuse to, turn this setting on and focus a lot more on the parrying. It completely recontextualizes every combat encounter that you come across. And if you need another excuse to play, and you want it to feel different, then why not? I think it's really, really cool. But is it Souls, though? Well, I mean, if you want an olive branch, then yes, here you go. Here's my olive branch. It's a Souls game. I said that it was pretty uncontested, and even though it is a weird example of a Souls game, yes, it's a Souls. It's fine. And for the record, both Sekiro and Another Crab's Treasure are both Souls-likes, just to make that clear. But you know what isn't Souls? The Norse saga of God of War games. I don't even know why I feel like I need to explain this to anybody, and I don't want to be mean, but like, no, this is not Souls. And I can't even explain to you why some people consider it to be a Souls game anyway. In fact, there are people who don't even consider it to be a character action, which is really weird. Like, yeah, it looks different and it plays super differently, but it's still a character action. Oh, but there's build crafting in the new God of War games. Okay, but have you considered that it might just be a character action RPG? Novel concept, but I mean, does that not make the most sense? Certainly more sense than Soulslike, right? And don't begin to tell me that it's a Soulslike because of the difficulty of the endgame or postgame bosses. That's how literally every video game works. Postgame bosses are supposed to be hard because they challenge your build and your character and your knowledge of the game. Just because a Final Fantasy has Ultima Weapon doesn't mean that Final Fantasy is suddenly a Souls-like. That doesn't make any sense. Sorry, I said I'm not trying to be mean here, it's just, I don't know, that take in specific baffles me. Like, anytime I hear anybody say that, I have to look at them like they have 6 heads or something. That just... why? What makes this Souls? Let's go for something a little bit more divisive now. What about Tunic? Does that count as a Souls-like? If you want spoilers for my answer, no, I don't think so. But I can see where the confusion comes from. If only because some of the combat mechanics also show up in Souls games, but make no mistake, Tunic is a Zelda clone. More specifically, it emulates the feeling and the gameplay of playing the first Zelda game for the NES. I'm obligated to talk about Tunic in any chance that I get because the game is really, really good. And I'm also obligated to give everybody their daily dose of Tunic propaganda because the game really is just that impressive. Like, legitimately a life-changing experience, but we're losing the plot again. We'll just, hold on. No, Tunic is not a Souls-like. There is an Estus Flask equivalent, there are checkpoints littered throughout the game, the map is interconnected, and the perceived difficulty of the game can come off as pretty daunting. But a lot of the crux for getting better at Tunic is simply just the knowledge of how the game works. In fact, knowledge as a weapon in Tunic is the equivalent of a hydrogen bomb, really. Knowing how some mechanics work or how some secrets work will absolutely obliterate the pacing of the game, and it's built like that on purpose. And you might be saying, well hey, knowledge and by extension memorization is really important in Soulslikes too, and fair. But maybe then it's more fair to say that Tunic has aspects of Souls-like in it. In my mind, putting a genre to a video game is like giving it a label. It gives you an immediate cursory glance at what the game plays like and what you can look forward to. The reason I say that Souls has very little to do with Tunic is because it's not a big enough part to really quantify that as a genre, at least in this game's specific case. It's more accurate to call it a Metroidvania, but even going past that, I think it just works most accurately as a Zelda clone. Because if you've played a Zelda game, that gives you a pretty immediate good idea of what the game is like. Put that in the same vein as calling something a Souls-like and it gives you an immediately different idea, and I just don't think that works here. It would be disingenuous for what the game is going for, and it would give players the wrong idea if they've never played it before. Now, with all of that being said, this game does have a parry mechanic, and I'm gonna give it the personal award of the best sounding and feeling parry that I've ever had in a video game. So here's a demo of that, and then we'll move on. Alrighty, so, are y'all ready for the final boss of this video? When I initially set out to make this thing, this was the most primary point of contention in my head. And not just for me either. The general consensus on what Black Myth Wukong is super debated. And from what I'm able to gather, it seems like it's a 50-50 split between whether this game is a Souls-like or a character action. It is the front lines for this fight that's going on right now. And if you ask me, I don't think there's ever going to be an end to that debate for this game in specific. The hallmarks for both types of genres are here in this game. There's build crafting, yet there's boss memorization. Many abilities you come across are mainstays, yet the combat has devoted animations. There's a character progression skill tree, yet also an Estus Flask equivalent. So what is it? Is it a Souls-like, or is it a character action? Let me also establish something before we move on. I have yet to beat Black Myth Wukong. I've sank some good hours into the game already, but just for the record, this is not a complete picture. But since the game is kind of new right now, I'm going to be using early game footage. And despite this being the only game in this video that I have not played to completion, the debate still stands. So let's start thinking about it. In the Souls column, we have learnable boss patterns, Estus Flask equivalent, attacks that mostly lock you into an animation, bonfire equivalents, losing XP whenever you die, and some sort of RPG mechanics. In the character action column, we have one primary weapon that we use throughout most of the game. With an asterisk again, because I know you can equip different staves, but they all work most of the same. Said weapon gets more moves as you level up. A skill tree system that is largely tied to the character itself and not any individual weapon. For this argument, I'm gonna just say that the staff and the character you play are largely the same thing. Skill expression through a combo system, and upgrades that you find throughout the world that don't really change, but you can individually upgrade. Everybody's gonna be using the hold the enemy in place thing, for instance. You don't have the ability to swap that off, and I'm just mentioning that here so nobody gets confused. But take a look at this list for a minute. It borrows from both camps, but surely it has to be one or the other, right? Unless... No, wait. But that can't be true. Is it both? Is this where we draw the line in the sand? Can a game really be a Souls-like and a character action? There's no way, right? They're obviously two different genres. How can they just combine a genre together and make a whole new genre? I'm losing my mind! There's no way! But why couldn't it be both? Yeah, I can do the video essay going unhinged thing too, what about it? So we're coming just fresh off of this section of the video, and you might be wondering, well, what was the point of all of that? Was it to pad out the runtime of the video? And admittedly, yeah, a little bit. But also, I did all of that to prove a point. Several points, actually. Soulslikes as a genre is sort of up and coming and burgeoning as it stands currently. Detractors of this genre will say that there's something of a super saturation for this kind of game on the market. And that's true, there are a lot of Soulslikes out there nowadays. The ubiquity of Souls in general is enough of a thing that an awful lot of people are getting confused about what a Souls-like even is. And I wager to call this phenomenon Souls-like brain rot, where we just start comparing everything to what a Souls game is. But I think the reason why this kind of game has a chokehold on the game market right now is because it's just so popular. Numbers don't lie, man. I mean, people like Souls games. It's also a really new and transformative genre. People are experimenting with how this particular type of game can be played. And devs are quick to jump on the bandwagon to see just how long this Wild West era of video game lasts, before all of the rules get ironed out and the establishments for what the genre is supposed to be really come into fruition. But are we past that point right now? Well, I don't know. Honestly, you tell me. Look at how many Souls games there are, and look at how varied each one of their gameplay is. You got a couple of obvious copycats for sure, but so does anything that gets popular. Have you ever played a third-person shooter that has procedural generation elements that's also a Souls-like? If not, here you go, it's Remnant. This series by itself acts as a testament to just how transformative the entire idea can get here. And devs who are not strictly AAA love to experiment because they need some sort of in the market. They need to bring in something new. And that happens for character actions too, actually. That's what I mean whenever I say that there's still value in both of these genres. There's still new things that we can do and new experiences to look forward to with both of them. And I really don't see the appeal in arguing for or against one side or the other. And if any of y'all even begin to tell me that Ultra Kill is not a character action game, I got news for you. Part of the promotional material for this game was literally calling it Devil May Quake. A first-person character action shooter. It doesn't get any more on the nose than that. Sorry, just tone it down again, Ian. Are character actions getting a little bit long in the tooth in terms of what they offer from a game-to-game basis? Sure, but that just means we need to innovate. We need more unique ideas coming out. Are Souls-likes ruling the market right now? Yeah, I mean a little, sure. But that's because we're in the experimental phase for this genre anyway. I have friends who I talk with that are more leaning onto one type of game versus the other. But even still, they play the exceptions to what they wouldn't normally play in these two types of games. And that might need to be the thing that you're looking for if you are still interested or if you want to see something new. Find the exceptions. Find something that piques your interest, even if it's a type of game that you're not super privy to normally. And overall, just keep an open mind. You might just be surprised at what your favorite game ends up being if you just decide to accept things. I will always advocate for people wanting change and wanting innovation, especially in their favorite kinds of games. For me, I'm always going to look forward to new stuff that comes out, especially if it piques my interest. And I'd like to imagine that the kinds of games I like to play is a pretty wide-reaching umbrella of different things that are just genuinely fun. I don't mean to hit you with the holier-than-thou garbage, but just, I don't know, man, can we just hate less? Like I said at the beginning, I know that I'm kind of burning the bridge at both ends here with just even making this video. But dude, can we just learn to enjoy stuff? Keep an open mind. If you see something you really don't like, then just ignore it. If you see people saying something that you don't like, then just ignore them. Don't worry, the genre of game that you like is valid. And I wish I didn't have to say that. But even still, you're allowed to not like something. It's just, can we all be a little bit more considerate of what other people enjoy? Can we let something be even if we don't like it? I'd like to think so. Regardless about how you feel about the end of this video, you're always allowed to say what you want. And if you feel the need to comment something at the end of this video, with your opinion unchanged through watching all the way through, then you have my blessing to say whatever you want. I think if nothing else, you've earned that by at least humoring me and giving me a chance. And if you somehow don't hate me by the end of this, and instead quite enjoyed the video, then you can subscribe to get a new video from me every Friday. If you maybe feel like that this message needs to get out to more people, then why not like and share the video? It feels kind of weird saying this at the end of this video in particular, so I'll just keep it brief. I have a Patreon, $1 a month tier. If you donate, I read your name out loud at the end of the video, and it gives you access to a channel in the Discord. If you want to join the Discord anyway, then you totally can, completely free. This proverbial war on action games and Souls games is only going to grow as time goes on. So if people want to grow distrustful and hateful over the whole situation, let's just all remember that right here, we don't have to have that hate. All the stuff that's been coming out isn't really hurting anybody, I don't think. And like I said, in terms of everything that's going on with everybody, just throughout their day-to-day lives, there are more important things to worry about, to be stressed out about. And at the end of the day, I don't think video games needs to be one of them. Not if it's a player preference thing. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and shut up now. I hope y'all enjoyed, and have a good day, everybody. Regardless about how you feel, I thank you for watching anyway.